Hello and welcome to today's webinar, which is entitled Life Hack My Microsoft 365. My name is Ted Hulsey. I'm CEO of IronPath and your host for today's event. First, let's go through a few housekeeping items. All participants are in listen-only mode. Today's session will be recorded and circulated to all registrants. Thank you for joining in for the live session. Please submit your questions as we go along, and we will try to address your questions on the fly. We will also have a dedicated Q&A section at the end of the presentation. Finally, we will send you a brief 1-minute survey immediately following today's event. Please share your feedback. Today's webinar is brought to you by a consortium of IT service providers serving your local community. Thank you to our sponsors. ACCI is headquartered in Birmingham, Alabama. Amnet is based in Colorado Springs, Colorado. IT Synergy serves the Phoenix and Denver metro areas. And Sagacent is headquartered in San Jose, California, serving Silicon Valley and the greater San Francisco Bay Area. Now let me introduce our guest speakers. We will have 4 speakers who will give you their best life hacks on how to use Microsoft 365 and all the related tools. Keith Keller is COO at ACCI and will show how to leverage Microsoft Teams in sales or with external prospects, customers, or business partners. Ed Correa is CEO at Sagacent and will share how to leverage the various file collaboration capabilities in Microsoft 365. Michael Kokenauer is president at IT Synergy. Michael will show you ways to leverage Microsoft Forms for various operational or HR functions. And last but not least, Trevor Deerdorf is CEO at Amnet and will explore the best practices around employee productivity leveraging various free Microsoft tools. And we will round out the event with your questions. So please keep them coming, and I'll be monitoring the Q&A log throughout the event. And let me now turn things over to Keith Keller. So Keith, I'm going to make you presenter.
Thank you, Ted. And welcome everyone. Good day to you. Just a little bit about our company. We're based out of Birmingham, Alabama. My business partner and I have known each other most of our lives. We're in our 33rd year of business. We're grandfathers in the industry. That's hard to believe. When Ted talked to us about this webinar, there's a lot of different things we can talk about with Microsoft Teams tools, but I zeroed in on using Microsoft Teams video for sales appointments. I'm dealing with our sales team during the year. A couple of years ago with the pandemic, everyone went to Teams, Zooms, WebEx, whatever you want to think through. Here in the Southeast, we like to have in-person meetings, but I understand also that some people are not comfortable with that. So we trained our team, our sales team, to use Teams for virtual appointments. And so just a few tips around using Microsoft Teams for virtual appointments. Our first tip is when you email a recipient a calendar invitation or an email, tell them in the email or in the calendar appointment that this will be a virtual meeting. Tell them when you talk to them on the phone, tell them in the calendar invitation. If you've used Microsoft Outlook before and you set up an appointment on your calendar and you want to invite attendees, when you click this button, and if you've used this before, you'll see that Microsoft automatically fills in the body of the calendar invitation, the Microsoft Teams meeting information. Now, most of us would say, well, this is very intuitive. The person I'm sending this to will automatically know that this is a virtual appointment. Believe me, no, it doesn't happen. I've been invited to meetings before where the person on the other end who invited me didn't tell me if it was in person or online. And so we took it a step further and we add information in the calendar invitation above that Microsoft Teams meeting information. And I even put a whole sentence in here. This will take place online. This is a virtual meeting. And so you wouldn't believe how many people still are confused. They don't read the text. I think it's self-explanatory, but anyway, let your invitees know that this is an online meeting and let them know in the calendar invitation, because that's where they're going to return to get the information for the meeting. Our second tip is include in the instructions of how you would attend the meeting in your calendar invitation. Make that information easy to find in the message. In fact, encourage your invitees to test their system ahead of time. You may have seen this a moment ago, but part of my text is here to join the meeting. Click the highlighted Join Microsoft Teams meeting link in this email below, which is down at the bottom. I've notated here in the information, you can accept the calendar invitation. You can open it on the day of the meeting to review the notes. I've let them know that when you click the link, if you have the application installed already, it will start. But if you don't, you can still attend the meeting using a web browser. And so I'm giving them some freedom not to have to install software, just allow them to use a web browser. And I've even encouraged them down here in point number 3, if you want to test your machine ahead of time, you can download the Teams to your device and have it installed. Here's a couple of support videos of how to test your machine, how to use your team. So I include this in all of our virtual sales meeting invitations so that the person on the other end will have plenty of information in order to attend the meeting. Third pro tip for today, when you join the meeting, go ahead and have your camera set to on instead of even waiting until your invitees turn their cameras on. In other words, when you join the meeting as the organizer, have your settings set to on so that when you join, others can see you. It's easier to get your message across. You can be excited about the appointment. You can be confused. You can raise your hand and say, I have a question. It shows your emotions about the meeting. But it's okay if your attendees, if you're the organizer, who feel uncomfortable to have theirs set to off. In other words, I've invited you to an appointment. I'm telling you about our business. I'm asking you questions about yours. If you don't feel comfortable with yours on, that's fine. But I want to let you see me so I can communicate the emotions of the meeting. When in Microsoft Teams, it's just a simple click. You may see this down here in the lower left-hand corner. But set your camera set to on. So when you do join, and just in case they join before you, your camera will be on and they'll know that the meeting started. Seems simple. It's amazing how many people don't pay attention to that. Our fourth tip, use the meeting notes in Microsoft Teams. When you do use the meeting notes in Microsoft Teams, all the parties can review the notes during the meeting. They can add notes, they can make changes. But after the meeting, those meeting notes are persistent in their Microsoft Teams tool. In other words, when the meeting ends, they'll have the notes already on their end. You won't necessarily have to email it to them. Certainly it's a good idea, but they'll have the notes, and those notes are shared between the parties that were attending and had the ability to edit the notes. This is sort of a single source of information around the meeting. Hey, you used Microsoft Teams to send the invitation in a calendar invitation. You use Teams to conduct the meeting. You use Teams meeting notes tool to take notes, pertinent information about the meeting, and then afterwards, that's the place they go to review the notes. So when you start your meeting, under the 3 dots that says More, you'll notice here that there's a tab for meeting notes. When you select this item, you'll get another screen that looks basically like a text, a place to enter text. It does take formatted text, so if you want to bold some items, have number lists, everything that you will say in maybe Microsoft Word or another note-taking tool, that's available here in Teams. I've created a few items here, labeled some actionable items, put in here our responsibilities after the meeting, your responsibilities as an invitation. Notice again, it's under the tool Meeting Notes in your Microsoft Teams tool. We could have also used the whiteboard if we wanted to, a place for Q&A, but in this instance, we took notes through the meeting, and this is where they're going to be retained. So some very simple things. They seem intuitive, but just want to remind you as a person who's organizing the meeting as a sales presentation or a first-time appointment to a prospective client or maybe even an existing client about an opportunity that you have, use the tool, let it be a place where you continually return if you're having many virtual sales appointments. So hope that helps. Love to hear from you on the chat window. If you have any additional questions, you can go to our website, acci.com, and visit us, send us an email. Thank you.
Hey, Keith, this may be a little too in the weeds, but let me just give it a try. Tom wants to know, I can't seem to generate a Teams invite from my normal email. Rather, I have to use my on Microsoft 2 email account. Why is that? I mean, that probably takes some guesswork, but go for it.
Yeah, I would suggest that there's probably a correlation in the Microsoft 365 tenant. You need to have your IT provider review the settings in your tenant. When organizations first set up their Microsoft tenant solution in order to deploy Teams, it starts with on Microsoft URL or domain. Basically, Microsoft gives everyone 2 domains, an on Microsoft domain, and then of course your company domain. And there's some settings in there that are not allowing, and they're not propagating through to your regular normal email. So I would have your IT provider check your Microsoft 365 tenant as a first place.
Okay, that's great. Perfect. All right, I don't see any other questions. Just a reminder to the audience, ping us with questions. I'm going to now so Keith, great job. Thank you very much. We're going to keep trucking here. We've got a lot of ground to cover. If you have additional questions for Keith around Teams, drop them in the Q&A chat and we will get them during the formal Q&A section. But with that, let me now turn things over to Ed Correa. Ed, you are now presenter.
Thank you. And can you see my slide?
Looking good.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm pretty excited to present. We're going to talk about some of the features that I consider just amazing in Microsoft 365, specifically data access and collaboration. You know, the must-haves for any organization to be profitable, efficient, is a clear direction, access to resources, and constant communication. Anyone who's ever been in a canoe or kayak with another person can easily relate to the importance of communication, because you're often fighting and the kayak's going in different directions. In business, it's absolutely crucial. I'm very much aware of this situation, because at the beginning of the pandemic, we decided to close our offices and all go to our respective homes and try and work. Because we deployed the following tools properly, we saw a 15% increase in productivity across the organization. And without these Microsoft 365 tools, we would not have been able to do that. First, let's talk about access to your data. It's been the holy grail for a long time to be able to access your data anytime, anywhere, on anything. Microsoft 365 really makes that possible for the first time. So when properly configured, you can access all your data no matter what device you're doing. Sadly, I see most people still stick with just their main computer, whether it be a desktop or a laptop. In my case, I'm frequently accessing my data from my desktop computer, my laptop computer, my tablet computer, and my smartphone all the time. It's amazing because the data is always there. I can continue the communications. It is just amazing, and it really has helped the organization a lot. Now, as far as data storage, people have a lot of confusion around OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint. Almost everybody I meet is confused, and this confusion often leads to misuse of these tools and ultimately a failure to experience the real benefit that they offer. OneDrive is designed for your files, the things that you don't need to frequently share with others or work in a work group. So if I'm working on maybe an individual employee's review, I'll do it in my OneDrive because I don't need to share that out. Microsoft Teams, on the other hand, exists for work groups, teams to collaborate. We're going to communicate, we're going to record those communications, we're going to share pertinent files to the work that needs to be done by that group, and we'll also be able to communicate via text messages, voicemails, and video calls. SharePoint, on the other hand, is a little bit more confusing to people. SharePoint was designed to be an intranet. Think of this as a private Wikipedia. It's basically a large file cabinet. You can put your documents in there. it's a reference area, a repository for data that you don't need all the time. But it is nonetheless extremely valuable. So if you've got policies and procedures that people need to reference, that's a great place for it. Also, SharePoint allows you the ability to share out or publish sections of its data publicly to the internet. So you could share this with individuals or make it generally publicly available. It is amazing. So bottom line, OneDrive is for your work files. Microsoft Teams is for communication and collaboration with the people you work with on a specific project or something. And finally, SharePoint is that company repository for archiving and sharing out corporate information. Next is Teams. Well, you just saw a presentation of some of the value of Teams, and I could talk all day about it, and I wouldn't even scratch the surface. It's, in my mind, it's Microsoft's killer app. Teams has allowed us to create a channel for every work group in our organization and communicate much more effectively. The first column in Teams allows you the choice to choose what you want to do, where you need to go. The second column, in this analogy here, I'll turn on my laser pointer. We've chosen to be in teams, or just think of them as work groups, and now we get to choose which one we want to use. Once we go into one, we can see information pertinent to that area. For example, let's pretend I've chosen marketing. And here's the different folders for marketing. Here I'm trying to communicate the marketing plan, make resources to the marketing team easily available. So that, in fact, I'll tell you one of the biggest challenges with Teams is continually going through these folders and making sure that they are concise with the proper information and you're not allowing data sprawl. But when you have a team or a group of people working on a specific challenge, having all the information from their goals to the resources they need in Teams is invaluable. And then, of course, as I said before, you can be communicating via text, voicemail, or like a phone call, just pure voice, or video. We do this all day long. Collaboration is coming next. So true collaboration has been a goal for a long time. And quite frankly, it seemed that unless you had a piece of paper in the center of a table and everybody looking at it, you couldn't really collaborate. Microsoft's been working on this for a while. They've made collaboration possible within the apps themselves, like Word and Excel, but it took Teams to really make it easy for the first time. So we're going to take a look at some examples, starting with the apps themselves. So this is just a screenshot, but I'm trying to exemplify, as people are looking at the same document, you'll see where they are and what they're doing. They can add comments, and you can see in real time what's going on. The key to this is you need to start by placing the document in OneDrive, Teams, or SharePoint and sharing it out, and then inviting other people. You can then work from these different applications and be collaborating in real time on the document. This is the older way with the Microsoft apps. Once we went to Teams, it looks more like this. Now you're sharing a document, somebody's got it open, they're sharing it with that work group. You're all talking in real time. You could be doing chats off to the side and making edits. This is just amazing. It is such a much better experience than was ever possible before. I love it. I have a leadership team at my company, and we have the yearly goal and what we're trying to accomplish. We also have key performance indicators. We'll pull up that spreadsheet for our weekly meeting, and it's the one spreadsheet. Everybody populates it with their important numbers, and then we're all working from our respective homes, and we can see as each person goes over their numbers, and we can collaborate and talk. We can make changes in real time. the collaboration experience is vastly improved. So in summary, with Microsoft 365, you can now work on any data, anywhere, anytime, on any device. You can store your data in OneDrive, Teams, or SharePoint. You can keep work groups focused on their mission, the communications relevant to a specific project, and put those resources at hand that they're going to need. And finally, collaboration is really valuable now, kind of for the first time. So I'm very excited about this. It's helped my company a great deal. If you need help, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Okay, great, Ed. I want to double click on a couple of things and field a couple of questions here. I mean, I think just to make one comment, I mean, I think the real power of file collaboration inside of Teams is that it now has context. I think that's been the big challenge for folks, is whether you're collaborating internally with colleagues or externally with other parties, that having that work group space on Teams, which has the file tab right there, which allows you to create documents right there, put them in the right folders, create a folder structure that's related to that work group, that gives the teamwork context that a lot of prior attempts at file collaboration really didn't have. And I think that's
Absolutely.
where the magic happens. I think another kind of inside baseball thing that the technical folks, speaking on this webinar know, is that SharePoint actually is like the infrastructure, the file collaboration infrastructure under Teams. A lot of people don't know that. So when you create group teams on Microsoft Teams, it will create file structures inside of SharePoint. And that's always something that folks don't realize. I mean, you could think about Teams as kind of like the easy, friendly interface to file collaboration in the cloud that can be then synced and shared to all these devices. So that's just another thing I think.
Well, you and I talked yesterday that I often like to use the analogy that think of these 3 data repositories as rooms in a home. If you think of Microsoft, where all this goes, as a cloud, you've got your cloud area, you've got a OneDrive area, you've got a Teams area, you've got a SharePoint. They're all interrelated, but they are different ways of accessing the data, each with their own power, but the data structure is all interconnected.
That's right. So let's tackle a couple. Let's tackle 1 or 2 questions here. So Laura asked a really good one. If you archive or delete a team, since it's no longer being used, what happens to the files?
So with all Microsoft items, you should have another backup routine running. I'll say that first. Microsoft even tells you that themselves. However, we've had employees come and go and teams get destroyed. That information is retained. And again, I've got a backup just in case. But so far, we've always been able to restore it. The one thing that we haven't been able to do, the chat function is separate from when you're in a group team. Anything that's put in within a work function group is retained. It's there, it's kept forever, it's persistent. But the things in the chat, if it's just a one-on-one, can sometimes disappear. And we found that the hard way.
Yeah, and the chats, if I'm not mistaken, are in a hidden folder inside the Exchange infrastructure for that particular user. So to your point about having a comprehensive backup of your Microsoft 365 environment, that comprehensive backup will be backing up all of the Exchange email data. So if you did need chat communications for compliance or a lawsuit that got filed down the road, you do want to, there are ways to, I mean, having a comprehensive backup strategy for Microsoft 365 will retain if you pick the right one and you're using the right one, it will have all of the relevant content, chats, files, folder structures from Teams, in the backup down the road. So a little bit about that, Laura. Hopefully that's helpful. I think in the interest of time, there's a couple more questions that came in around file collaboration in Teams, and we'll come back to those, Ed. But let's, at this point, turn things over to Michael to talk about some of the other cool apps in the Microsoft 365 platform. Michael, making you presenter now.
Awesome, thank you, Ted. Let me share my screen out here. And let me get the right one. And how's that look?
We see your slides.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to talk about using Microsoft Forms, and specifically we're going to talk about using Microsoft Forms to standardize some of your internal processes. So let me just jump right in here, and I'm actually going to do some live demo stuff, but let me give you a little bit of background on Microsoft Forms first. Microsoft Forms is one of the less well-known tools in the Microsoft 365 toolbox. If any of you have ever clicked on what Microsoft calls the waffle icon, which is a little 3x3 grid of dots in the upper left corner when you log into Microsoft 365, there's a lot of stuff under there. And we're all used to the big ones like Teams and SharePoint and Outlook and all the things that we've talked about today, but there's also a bunch of other stuff in there, and Microsoft Forms is one of them. And what Microsoft Forms does is allow you to develop standardized forms. So think about a form that you fill out on the internet that you can collect all kinds of different information, and you can make it rule-based input. So you can say, you know, if they answer this, or you can say they have to choose one of these two choices, or they have to fill in an answer here, or specify a date, or whatever else. There's lots of different options for input types. So we can do dates, or we can do comment fields, or we can do, you know, select from a list of options, or ratings, or all kinds of different things. You can set it up so that when somebody fills out one of your Microsoft Forms, you get an email notice so that you know that some data has been submitted, if that's something that you want. And you can also take all of the submissions that people have given you for a particular form, and you can download those in a spreadsheet format, a CSV, or like an Excel type format, so that you could then, you know, slice and dice that data further, or maybe put it into another application to send out mass emails, or whatever you want to do with it from there. So it makes the data from your forms very easy to work with. And then if you want to get really advanced, and this is beyond the scope of what we're going to cover today, but the folks who are presenting with me today can all help you with this, is you can combine this with a tool called Microsoft Power Automate to create automated workflows called automated flows, that when you fill out a form, you can have it take actions in your business. So maybe it gets, you know, forwarded to HR for approval, or maybe it creates a new user automatically in some system, or whatever else. So again, a little beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about today, but certainly something that is available with Microsoft Forms. So I've got a bunch of steps here in my slides, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to jump out and we'll do a live demo. So I am in my Microsoft 365 environment here, and I've chosen Microsoft Forms. So I've clicked that waffle icon that I talked about, and I've chosen Microsoft Forms from the menu here. And this is where you would actually come to create some forms. So I'll start out by hitting the new form button, and you can just kind of see what this looks like. So this just starts out with a blank form. I can give it a title, and then I can start to add different things to my form. So these were the different input types that I was talking about before. You can even click this down arrow and get even more input types. So I can allow people to upload files. I can divide my form into sections. I can do choices, whatever else. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump back to a form that we've already created. So one of the things that we use Microsoft Forms for internally is when our customers are onboarding a new employee, they will frequently send us a request, hey, we need to set up this new employee. You know, so-and-so is starting on Monday. We might need a computer set up. We need them to have access to all the things they need access to, whether that's printers or data or applications or whatever else. We need email set up, you know, all kinds of different things that they want to communicate to us. So what we've done is we have reduced that all into a Microsoft form. And then we make this available to our customers where they can log in and kind of fill it out. So you can see here, I've divided this into sections. I've got some basic information on the user. So first name, last name, display name, email address, title, cell phone, etc. And then what do they need access to? So in this case, with this particular customer, this is different areas of their SharePoint. So admin access, marketing, operations, etc. And for each one, we've given them the choice of whether that employee needs read-only or full access to that particular area. You know, they've got an office printer. This is a small office, and so do they need access to that printer? And then we've got some deadlines where you can see I've restricted it to the date input type that we talked about earlier. And they can choose what's the deadline to have this new user set up and what's the deadline to have their computer set up. Because with this customer in particular, they may say, hey, this person is starting on Monday, so we don't really need the computer until Monday, but we want you to set up their email account today because we want to start you know, sending them calendar invites and sending them emails and looping them into different communications and whatever else. And so once you've got your form designed and you've got your sections and your questions, then you can kind of launch the form. So you can start out with a preview so you can see what the end user experience will look like. And then you can actually go and start to collect the responses. And so you can see over here on the right, I can choose what my different options are. I can allow anyone to respond. So this is, in our case, because we're allowing anybody from our customer organization. So we leave this set to where anybody can respond. Whoops, sorry about that. Where anybody can respond, only people in my organization or specific people. And then you can see some other options that we've got here in terms of what you can give them for responses. You can get a link to the form, all the different things that you can do in terms of collecting those responses. And then you can email them that link. And if you want to get really crazy, you can even download a QR code to send people that they could scan with their cell phone and go directly to that form. And then once you've launched that form and you've kind of communicated out to the world, and send it to whoever you're going to send it to, then you can start to collect responses. And as I get responses, those will come in here. In this case, this is a new form, so we don't have any responses on this yet, but you can see where I could hit view results, or I can open the results in Excel. So I would actually be able to download those results in an Excel spreadsheet if I was getting a large number of responses and I wanted to be able to, like I said before, slice and dice that data, maybe send them some email, do whatever else. So all the different things that I can do with these Microsoft Forms. And so let me switch back to the presentation here. So we talked about creating new forms. We talked about designing the form. You give the form a title. You can add what they call objects, which is basically just different questions or different question types. You can break it into sections. And you saw here from my sample form, when I go to preview it, the different sections are broken into different pages. So I had my form broken into 4 sections, and you can see here down at the bottom, it says page 1 of 4, and that's because I've got 4 different sections set up on this form. You can change the theme by clicking at the top right. So if I don't like the color, I can go in here to the theme and choose different colors or different backgrounds or whatever else I might want to do. And then I can choose some rules for my form. So if I wanted to do that, so if I come in here and I can go to settings, and you can see all the different things that I can do here in terms of my form. So I can request an email response when somebody fills it out. I can choose who can respond, and then I can also select all these various other options when it comes to collecting responses to the form. So again, like I talked about at the beginning, kind of rule-based. So I can build a lot of rules for how I want people to interact with my forms, who can respond to my forms, what sort of data, and what types of fields I'm collecting. So I can limit the responses to text or to a date or to a survey response or net promoter score. You saw all of the different options that I had there. And then, like I said, when you're finished, you can hit collect responses at the top right, choose who you want to accept response from, and you can even get that QR code so that people can scan it from a mobile device and fill out your form directly. And then as those responses are submitted, like I said, we can download those to Excel. So if you need any help getting started, by all means, you can reach out. There's an email address where you can reach us. You're also more than welcome to go to our website at www.itsynergy.com. And Ted, I'll hand it back to you if there's any questions.
Yeah, there's a couple questions specific to forms. Let's kind of just try to tackle those quickly. So Scott first wants to know, if you were thinking about sending out some type of survey to a broad customer base, can you use multiple emails from a database, or is this just for people within your organization?
Yeah, so you can absolutely send it out to multiple people within a database. What you can do from inside Microsoft Forms is just generate a link that goes directly to that form. And then you can take that link and you can plug it into whatever your emailing tool is. If you're using a marketing tool like a Constant Contact or a HubSpot, you could just put the link in the email there. Or if you're emailing folks directly, you can just include the link in your email and they can click that link and it'll take them directly to the form to fill it out.
Great. One more question on forms and then we'll hand it over to Trevor. So Micah wants to know, if we wanted to use forms for onboarding, how secure is the information? If I wanted to email new hire information forms, for example, could I ask for social security numbers, addresses, etc.?
Yeah, so what I would say to that question is, the form is in a secured location, so it's an HTTPS that the web address is going to go to. So the information that you're transmitting is encrypted. I think a much bigger question to ask in terms of submitting potentially confidential information as part of that form is, what are you doing with the data after you gather it? So for example, if I have a bunch of forms with, say, social security numbers in it, and then I download that in an Excel spreadsheet, The real question when it comes to security is, what am I doing with that Excel spreadsheet? It's safe in terms of submitting it through that form, but then where am I going with that Excel spreadsheet? And that's really outside of Microsoft Forms, but certainly something you need to be cognizant of as it relates to security.
Right. So it can live somewhere in your file system, but you have to then think through what are your information protection strategies around confidential information that just live in your file systems.
Exactly, and that's a much bigger question than just a Microsoft Forms question.
That's for next quarter.
Right.
Anyway, all right. Okay, well, great. So we've got one more presentation to tackle. So let me hand things over to Trevor. And again, we'll have time for formal Q&A here in a couple of minutes. So let me hand the ball to Trevor. Thank you, Michael. Okay, Trevor, you should have control now.
All right. And
looking good.
See here. Show screen and here.
We had your PowerPoint before. Now we have your
this one. Here we go.
Okay.
All right. So this is actually not a Office 365 tool. It's actually a free open source tool that's been available for Microsoft on and off for the past 27 years. And so we're going to dive into just one of the many tools that are in Microsoft Power Toys today. So quick history on it. First of all, it was available in Windows 95. And the tool that most people used then was called Tweak UI, which allowed users to customize the more obscure settings of the operating system without having to edit their registry. And then they took it away in Windows 98, and we didn't see it come back until Windows XP. And so that had some different tools in it, and it was kind of handy, and then they took it away. And it didn't show back up again until 2019. It was released for Windows 10. Why they skipped Windows 98, ME 2000, Vista 7, and Windows 8, I can't tell you, but it's a pretty great app to have for now. Use it while you can. They're bound to take it away in 12, who knows. So this is what the tool dashboard kind of looks like. These are all the different tools that you can use. And the one I'm going to talk to you about today is the Fancy Zones. And Fancy Zones lets you carve up a monitor into multiple slices. So sometimes people have more than one application open at a time. Can you imagine that? And often they'll do that with 2 or 3 or 5 monitors. And they're often, you know, not the same size, shape, brand, whatever. It's not pretty. This is my desk. And I've got these 2 curved 4-foot wide monitors, but you don't have to have monster monitors like that to benefit from this. Some people are using high resolution televisions these days. But even if you've got a larger monitor that you want to carve up, it's a whole lot tidier on your desk. And I'm going to show you how to break that up into zones that don't make you manually shrink and stretch and redo the windows every time you have multiple apps open in that window. And yes, I'm standing at my desk. I've got a treadmill desk. I'm standing on it, not walking at the moment. I'd be winded if I did. But this is what my monitor can look like when I've carved it up into my zones. I've got all these apps open. And honestly, I'm mostly active in the bottom section there. So let me do a quick little demo here and jump out of PowerPoint and jump into. So here's Power Toys. Bring this to center here. And I realize with my wide monitors that you probably can't see the text very well, but this is these are all the different applications here. I'm going to go into Fancy Zones and launch the layout editor. This is my current layout for my lower monitor, but for the sake of doing a demo, I'm going to pretend we're going to do a new layout. Grid is going to have stuff spaced like mine is. Canvas is where you have overlapping zones, and maybe I'm just too OCD to have windows overlapping other windows. I think it would make me a little nuts. So I think most people probably will use the grid option. So let me see here, and I'm going to close this guy, and we'll go back to this. Move that out of my way. So you can see I've got right now 3 different zones on my computer. And maybe I've got in zone 2 here what I want to work on most, and then other apps on the side. But maybe I want to have more applications open than that. And so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to split zone 1 like that. I'm going to come over here to zone 4, press the shift key here. Now I can do a horizontal split. Now I've got 5 different zones that I can then easily resize. I want this one to be kind of down the middle here. And then this is my new desktop layout, which isn't too dissimilar from my usual layout. But if you want to go nuts and have all kinds of zones set up, you can do that. You can go nuts and have, I think, pretty much all the zones you want. So that's how you set up fancy zones. Let me back out of this now, just kind of show you how I apply it here. So I'm going to just drag this, press the shift key, grab your title bar at the top, and just slide it over, drop it in the zone you want it to be in. Anything you drop just automatically snaps to that zone to the size that you've set in advance. So I think that's kind of cool. And because I've got a little bit of time yet, I'm going to show you one other productivity hack that is built into Windows 11 that many people don't know about. So here's a web page where you can get the link to get to your Power Toys. But have you ever had to copy and paste multiple things into one document? And so you do Control-C, Control-V over and over again, maybe from multiple sources. Well, if you use Windows-C and Windows-V, you can actually grab multiple pieces of text. So I'm doing Windows-C, and then coming over here and doing Windows-C again. Let's see. This is Teams messing with me here. All right, and then grab Windows-C there. Now when I'm over here ready to do some pasting, I end up with something I copied before. Windows button. All right. Windows-C. Okay, you Teams guys, why is it popping up, making me look silly? I've got all these different things in my clipboard that I can choose from, and I can paste them into my document as I'm going. Lots of different images, text, and all these things that are handy to use. So to get that clipboard up, you just end up pushing the Windows B button, and it brings up that clipboard for you. So don't want to save that document. Relaunch this real quickly and switch here. And if any of you want to get the Power Toys link, it's on GitHub, but it can be a little tricky to navigate to. So I've created a nice little shortcut for you at amnet.net/pt for Power Toys. That's what I have for you, Ted, and I think I've got minute 15 under time. What do we have for questions?
All right, so feel free to drop in some questions for Trevor on Power Toys or how to leverage big monitors on your desk. I mean, I think just so we don't kind of like forest for the trees a little bit on this, I mean, you guys saw that picture of Trevor's monitors. These are massive monitors, right? So there's abundant evidence that multiple monitors boost productivity. But I think as one of the pictures Trevor showed is you can also kind of create a mess, a mess for users. You could have a mess on your desk. You could have something that is like hard to manage that might get in your way. And so the art of these things is to leverage multiple monitors, leverage large monitors, and leverage some of these more esoteric software tools that allow you to organize your work. I mean, I think Trevor and I, when we were doing a dry run yesterday, he opened up a spreadsheet on that monitor without the power tools, and it was like, I don't know, it was like maybe like 300 columns wide or something on that monitor. So you don't want to be working in a spreadsheet with 300 columns. You want to be.
If I could volunteer a comment. So Trevor and I have a very similar setup. I have a 38-inch wide. He has 49-inch wides. But you did see that when he was trying to present his presentation from a very wide monitor, the presentation became a box in the middle. A nice solution for that is you can pick up one of these inexpensive monitors. I think I got this one at $150 on Amazon, and I connected it by a USB-C cable to the side, and then I was sharing that to the presentation. So yes, I love my massive monitor and all the work I can do, but there are some things that are not necessarily going to work well. And you know, we have to use the right tool for the right thing.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, let's so just one more time, Trevor. The link to go get Power Toys from the Amnet website is, give us that URL one more time. amnet.net/PT. Okay, so you can go download Power Toys there. Let's go into formal Q&A mode here. And I'm going to make myself the presenter again. Okay. All right. Did that work? No, it didn't. Oh, it did. It did. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep,
great.
we see ourselves. Oh, there we go. Q&A.
Okay, here we go. All right, so let's go into some formal Q&A here. This is kind of mics off, open forum. So we've got just about 10 minutes. So let's kind of tackle some of these questions. This one is really open to anybody who's kind of a SharePoint or file collaboration expert. But April says, we noticed that our docs are not syncing. So we have it in SharePoint and share it to Teams, and share it to Teams only to have it constantly have to resave back to our SharePoint OneDrive. So that's kind of maybe a little bit like a tech support question in the weeds, but could somebody parse a little bit, like what's April and company, what are they missing in terms of their approach to file collaboration potentially? I mean, maybe it's a question that needs to be reformatted a bit, but I guess what I would make is that, I mean, if you think back to Ed's coaching, SharePoint is a very powerful tool, and you've got to think through when you build a SharePoint site, what is your collaboration scenario? Is it an internal repository of files that need to be shared? Is it a intranet type experience? So like a SharePoint site that you're going to serve up in a web browser for internal employee information sharing, or is it a SharePoint site that you potentially are sharing externally with external business partners or customers, that sort of thing? So you really need to think through those things, and then make sure that you have the permissions set correctly so that you actually know where that data is syncing to. Who's the owner, you know, who's the administrator or the owner of that SharePoint site, et cetera. So, and I think the reality is, my 2 cents on answering this question, if I could just stick my neck out a little bit, is that a lot of people, the things they're trying to do with SharePoint, they should be doing them in Teams. And if you start out with the more intuitive team collaboration, file collaboration experience, you're going to get natively out of Teams. You're going to have a lot more success, I think, just eliminating a lot of these challenges about where is the file, does everybody have access who needs it. I don't know if anyone has any other thoughts.
I just
I thought you were great.
Okay.
Michael.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I don't know if it relates specifically to that question, but I also would like to draw a distinction when it comes to data in SharePoint between syncing and linking. And I know those two sound very similar, but if you're syncing, that indicates that you actually have a copy of whatever you have synced from SharePoint on your hard drive. Maybe you're going to be on a plane, you're going to be somewhere without internet access, you're going to change those files, and then when you come back online, it'll try to sync it back up with SharePoint. Versus linking, where it exposes it through your OneDrive, but you're actually accessing live SharePoint data. And I would just point out that we've had users in the past that have tried to do a very large volume of syncing, and that does not work, whereas linking works a lot better for those types of scenarios. So you just have to think through, do I need access to this offline when I'm not connected to the internet? Or would I rather just have a live view of the data? I'm going to assume that there's a connection to the internet, but I'm going to have a much better experience in terms of that live access.
Okay. There's a follow-up question. I mean, I think one comment I would make on file collaboration is this is, in my experience, like a major pain point for a lot of organizations. I mean, I think a lot of companies, maybe certain things are working okay, but a lot of organizations, it's like you're not yet good. And we want to go from good to great. And if you're not yet good, talk to your managed service provider about kind of an audit of how you're doing file collaboration, and if there's ways to simplify things, streamline things, do a data migration from maybe a traditional file server that you have that requires VPN access and should be living in a different place in the cloud. Ask about those things, because I think in my experience, there's a lot of folks struggling in that area.
I'd also point out too, and it was demonstrated by Ed and Keith both, that simultaneous editing of a document or a spreadsheet is a game changer. And so if you and your organization are not doing that today, to your point, Ted, about collaboration, like, you really need to have that discussion and get into that game, because it is just tremendous.
Okay, and it just a question just popped in. Interested in kind of thoughts here from the group. Robert asks, is there a secure way to use SharePoint to emulate Dropbox for sharing files with outsiders who do not have Office 365?
So the answer to that question is yes. There's specific ways to share documents. Somewhat what Michael talked about with his forms, but it's similar to sharing documents. You don't want to just send a link that can be read by anyone. You want to share with a specific person when you share a document. You, in simplest terms, and I'm not doing a demo here, but you would right click on the document and you would click sharing permissions, and then you would pick a person's specific email, as opposed to creating a link off of a document and blasting it out to multiple people. Michael, you were going to chime in on that?
I agree with you 100%. And I'd also add, you can share individual files or you can share entire folders. So we actually use SharePoint as a collaboration space with our customers, where we give them access to a folder belonging to them on our SharePoint site. And then both we and they can collaborate on the data inside of that folder.
But I would add, be careful about permissions that you've extended sometime in the past and you haven't revoked them. We've already run into some scenarios where people shared things, didn't realize it remained shared, something else was put into that folder, and embarrassment ensued.
And if it's just embarrassment, it's not that big of a deal.
I was going to say that's the good side of the scale.
Right.
Yeah. So Robert, hopefully that answers your question. I mean, I think between all the different file collaboration techniques that Ed talked about in depth, you can definitely do everything you can do with Dropbox. And then both Keith and Michael both double clicked on a couple different external sharing use cases that are very common for, either, sharing a OneDrive file with permissions and timeouts and, private select access to a single individual, to all the way to the point where Michael said, like, you can build SharePoint sites that multiple people from two different organizations can collaborate into and add and delete files over time for certain collaboration exercises that may take place. Let's go back to Teams. And actually, this may be another question from Robert, but let's go straight from the top here. Have we found a means to limit Office 365 presence indicator to internal users? That is, can we prevent outsiders from seeing our presence in Teams when it's running? So that's I'm going to give that out as a jump ball.
I actually haven't tried that one yet.
Yeah,
That's
I'm not
not
aware of a way to do that. I could be wrong, but I'm not aware of a way to do that.
Okay, but it's I mean, I guess we get the point. I mean, it's there's kind of a security and privacy related dimension, and sometimes, look, even with Microsoft and all the great engineering they do and testing and everything else, sometimes there's stuff that is a little less private or secure, and then changes down the road because people realize maybe it's sharing information you wouldn't want to be sharing. So.
Oh, without a doubt, But yeah, I did. It's not something I thought about as being a problem. Now it's going to bug me until I go figure it out.
All right, so stay tuned. Reach out to Ed if you want the follow-up on that one. Let's see here. We talked about Laura's question with archiving. Let's see here. So I'm just going to throw out April's question here. Was there an initial Teams format that everyone was trained on, or is it a free-for-all how people want to design as individuals? I think what she's asking about, that question came in the context of, I mean, maybe comment, somebody, if you would, on just governing teams and you know, like this problem of data sprawl, team sprawl, folder sprawl, SharePoint site sprawl. I think that the reality is that there is some powerful capabilities here where people can just kind of go nuts with creating folders and teams and everything else. Talk about that. What is the default? What's the recommended? How do you maintain this over time?
Well, I'd recommend forming a committee. I think less is more. Think about, pretend you're building a website. You know, you'd start with the end in mind, and you'd start drafting out, well, what's the purpose? What are we going to put into it? Teams is so powerful, but as you said, Ted, the data sprawl can become crazy. And then you get things that have valuable content. The content really shouldn't be there, but somebody created that channel, and then undoing the spaghetti mess can be really challenging. I'd say start small, less is more. Think about what you want to do and tiptoe into it. We started with just 4 channels or work groups and teams, and then we don't allow just new ones to be created. They have to be asked for permission to do so. And I think we've only gotten rid of 2 in the last 4 years. So, you know, we've been very careful about rolling them out. Michael, you do a lot of this. Any thoughts there?
Well, my thought is just to turn it into a little bit of a shameless plug, just in terms of the 4 people that are on this call. This is what we do all day, every day. And the advantage we have over an individual organization is we see this across a wide variety of customers. And so we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think that you can work with any of us on the call to create a plan to implement this properly, and we can help you avoid those potholes.
Okay, I can't think of a better way to end today's presentation. We covered a lot of ground. We covered, you know, some hidden gems you may not have known about. We've probably touched on apps that your organization may or may not be using to your best of your ability today. We covered a lot of ground. That's the good news, and hopefully everyone who attended today's session has come away with some new insights and action items, maybe some questions to follow up with our sponsors on. We strongly encourage you to do that. Somebody asked for a copy of the presentation. We will be circulating a video version of today's presentation to everybody who registered or attended. You will also find this content on each sponsor's YouTube channel down the road here. And you have all of their website addresses here to reach out and make a connection. With that, I want to thank all of our speakers today for all of the great information. Keith, Ed, Trevor, and Michael, thank you guys. Thank you, gentlemen. And we look forward to seeing you all on a new webinar in the new year. And happy holidays, everybody. Take care.